Welcome everyone to episode 2 of the Phoenix Report. I'm Jack Connor. I want to thank you guys for all the positive responses to my first two-part episode, 1A and 1B. If you haven't listened to them, feel free to go back and do so. My guest today is someone who is a great friend of mine and a former bandmate of mine from my time in the band Zebrageist. For those of you who may be unfamiliar with Zebrageist, that was a band I was in from 2009 through 2012, and it was largely based in St. Petersburg, Florida. I was the bass player for that band, although I would do a lot of backup singing and even sing a few lead vocals for a few songs here and there. I first joined that band in the summer of 2009, which consisted of lead singer and guitarist Russell Hawes and lead guitarist Jose Perez. They originally had a drummer named Diego Mata, but he had already left the band by the time I came into the picture. Still, he recorded drum parts in his studio for 3 songs, and the rest of us completed the rest of the record at Russ's apartment. We had an absolute blast getting to know one another while we made that record. By the time we were ready to start playing it out, we had ended up adding drummer Brian Scott, and that, I think, was the definitive lineup of Zebrageist. Now, we went on to play a few shows together and eventually became finalists in a contest by the local radio station called 97X. The contest was called the Next Big Thing Local Band Search, where local bands would get together and compete for the opportunity to play at 97X's annual Next Big Thing Festival. And that would be in front of a crowd of thousands, and you'd have several famous bands from around the country would be on it, so it was kind of a big deal. Now, even though we didn't get the festival gig, we did manage to expand our fan base locally quite a bit. In the months that followed the Next Big Thing contest, Zebrageist started working on some new material. And unfortunately, we seemed to run into a bit of an identity crisis. By that, I mean we soon started to fall into those same pitfalls that so many young bands fall into. Tensions and infighting started to rise between certain members of the band, and there were some people in the band that didn't necessarily want to play our old material. There were different styles being experimented with, all that sort of thing. We were in a full-blown identity crisis. And it was a much different situation than how our first record came together. Probably the most controversial moment in the band, to me, was the decision to let Brian Scott go and look for a new drummer. Because, I really liked Brian. He was, and still is, a fantastic musician and an overall great guy. And Russ and Jose liked him too, but for some reason they felt like they were having a tough time writing new material with him. I guess maybe the way he played and the way they were expecting it to play, because keep in mind, we didn't have a full-time drummer when we made that first record. So we were still trying to find our groove, even though we were playing with this guy for a while. I will go on record as saying that I was against the idea, but ultimately I was outvoted. So we ended up letting Brian go. And I think since then, I've talked to Russ and Jose about this. I think since then we kind of came to the agreement that letting him go probably wasn't the best move. However, out of that situation, we ended up turning a negative into a positive because we had the extreme fortune of finding an excellent new drummer to fill that void. Eric Bertagnolli came into the picture, having previously played in other Bay Area bands, and he had also played in several bands in his hometown of Mantua, Ohio. Now, Eric was a phenomenal drummer and a great guy, and even though I missed having Brian on the drums, I was very happy to have the chance to get to know Eric and to have the pleasure of sharing the stage with him. Now, since then, he has returned to Ohio and is a fellow podcaster. Check out his show, the Music Speaks podcast, which can be heard on both Soundcloud and iTunes. He has even had me on one of his episodes, so I am very proud to return the favor. So now, I would like to officially welcome to the Phoenix Report a great friend of mine and one hell of a drummer and podcaster, Eric Bertagnolli. Eric, how's it going, man?
Good, man. That was a hell of an intro. Thank you, sir.
Thanks. I'm glad I was able to get through it. I had to try and cover a lot of the history of the band just to kind of provide some context and to get to how you came into it, so hopefully you didn't mind sitting through all that.
No, not at all, man. Not at all. It's not like when you sit and listen to Kevin Smith podcast and he gives like 15, 20-minute intros before his guest is allowed to say a word. So this was this was a cakewalk compared to that.
Definitely. Well, he's my idol, so I kind of took that model from him. Lovingly ripped it off, you could say.
Right.
But yeah, man. So this is a really cool thing, and I remember when you had me on yours, and just you don't realize, it's so easy to to let things go if you haven't seen somebody in a while, and even with someone you talk to day to day, it's funny how it's so easy for us to just go and say hi to someone and just be like, hey, how's it going? How's your day? But never really getting to sit down and like take the time and say, it's like, man, you're great. What happened? How did you come to be in this area? So this is like a cool thing almost, not that we can't, have normal conversations, without being recorded and all that, but it is kind of a cool way to, to kind of get to know each other in a way. And not that we don't know each other, but you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, especially like in our episode that we did on the Music Speaks podcast with you, getting you and Kurt together for the first time, because that was the first time you guys had ever really talked, if I'm not mistaken, right?
It was. No, I had never met Kurt, and Kurt Braden is Eric's co-host of the Music Speaks podcast, and Kurt was a guy that you had jammed with since you were kids, and learning sort of your history with him, you would always told him, it's like, Jack, you got to meet my buddy Kurt, man. He's just like you. You guys will get along great. You had always said that Kurt and I were like twins separated at birth, and and somehow that we had to meet each other. And when I met him, you were right. He was a cool guy.
Yeah, you and him share a lot in common. I always when I started getting to know you, you reminded me more and more of him with like the WWE. You both play bass, you both sing, you're into the same types of music. I was like, Jack is basically Florida Kurt.
Pretty much. I'll take it. So, let's talk about music for a little bit. Let's talk about your early history and influences, which, I've kind of gone back and listened to on the first Music Speaks podcast, episode. But, for anyone listening here, when did have you always been a musician? I mean, like, when did you start, like, seriously playing drums?
The story sort of began when I first met Kurt. We both took Kung Fu together. And then,
really?
Yeah, we both took Kung Fu together. This was probably about 6th or 7th grade.
I had no idea you did that. How far did you get with Kung Fu?
Brown belt.
Nice.
Almost took it all the way, but never could quite. The problem was like Kurt and I stuck with it for so long. We stuck with the same school for so long. We both made it to brown belt, and then we were really the only two that had advanced that far. So the other kids were always sort of playing catch up, and we were always teaching them, but we never got around to actually doing our black belt training. And then college came around, and music came around, and martial arts sort of took a back seat. But that's sort of where I first met Kurt, and we became good friends. He ended up being my locker partner in 8th grade, and then somehow at a birthday party that I was invited to for him, that I ended up getting the flu and not being able to attend, they got the idea that they wanted to start a band. Kurt decided he wanted to play bass. One of our other friends decided he wanted to play guitar, and somebody else was singing, and they're like, who can play drums? Oh, Eric can play drums. So I sort of got stuck playing the drums, and it was sort of chosen for me, but ended up working out because I had sort of a natural inkling to that instrument, whether it being that I didn't really have a good ear for melody. I'd never really studied note theory, harmonies, anything like that, but I had a good sense of rhythm, just the raw power that came from hitting the drums. So, my dad looked in the paper, because back then we didn't have Craigslist, and found a guy selling an old Rogers drum kit from like the 50s with some crappy Sabian cymbals and just basically enough to get you started. And we bought that. I set it up in my bedroom and just started teaching myself from there.
Nice. So it's like it's almost like you became a drummer sort of like out of default.
Exactly. It's the only instrument that was left over.
No, I mean that's pretty much how I ended up picking up the bass. So it's funny how that works sometimes.
Yeah, exactly. You get stuck with whatever's left, and it ends up. I'm not necessarily a super religious person or anything, but somehow fate chose drums for me. And I think if I had ended up getting stuck with any other instrument, it wouldn't have worked out nearly as good for me as playing the drums did.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny how things like that just kind of come together, and like especially when you're young and starting out, it just. Sometimes you just know what feels right for you, and you can't really explain it, but it just. You form a bond with an instrument, and it just kind of happens that way. So, Were there any bands or like drummers, like specific drummers in particular, like when you were first starting out that you wanted to emulate or that you liked in particular, especially when you're first learning the instrument?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, when you start and you're into heavier music, Lars Ulrich from Metallica becomes one of your earliest influences, sort of by default, because he gets a lot of flack, but he actually is a really good drummer, particularly on their older material, and it's attainable for a beginning drummer to look at the stuff he plays, and it's not like some progressive metal god that's playing in odd times and polyrhythms with different time signatures over your different limbs. He's playing simple, straightforward stuff that is not the easiest thing in the world, but it's attainable. You can listen to it and go, okay, I could see myself playing that. So early on, it was Lars. Then I started to get into Korn really big when Follow the Leader came out, and the way Dave Silvera plays is a much funkier style. So I started getting influenced by funk music just through him, through his interpretation of it into hard rock and heavy metal. So Dave from Korn, Lars Ulrich were probably my first two influences on the drums. And then over time, as you get better, as you start listening to more and more stuff, Morgan Rose has always been a hero of mine for not only the way he plays drums, but the visual aspect.
Yeah.
And for being as old as he is, he still kills it up there. He plays drums with more energy than guys who are 19 years old.
Absolutely, he's a very expressive player, and his backup vocals are like definitely a strong part of Sevendust, of their sound. It's interesting how you mentioned Lars. Like people get a lot of flack for that. I never really understood why, and maybe that's a drummer thing. Why do you think people criticize Lars? Is it just because of the fact that he's popular, or maybe they don't like his personality and just assume that he's a bad drummer? What do you think that is?
I think personality does have a lot to do with it. He's sort of the mouthpiece of Metallica, for better or for worse. And I mean, he's put his foot in his mouth a few times, and people don't like what he has to say about a lot of things. For his drumming, over time, like especially on their newer stuff, he's gotten. You can call it sloppy. I could see some people saying that his tempos are all over the place if you ever listen to their live stuff. And a lot of it's because he's standing up while he's playing. He's, making weird faces, spitting on people. Like, he's doing a lot more than just playing the drums. And he has no click track. They're just a rock band that gets up there and plays it. And his tempos do shift quite a bit from what they are on the record and from part to part, or they really shouldn't. But that's just his style, man. I mean, over time, that's just kind of how he's become.
Oh, yeah. I mean, with some of those songs, and for as long as they've been doing it, I mean, I would think that sort of thing has to be almost unavoidable. I mean, I'm not a drummer, obviously, but I mean, I would think that just keeping that all together has got to be very, very hard to do. So, I mean, I don't know if I would feel the need to like take him to task on that sort of thing, but yeah, it's definitely not an easy job. But like you said, he's very much a showman too, kind of like Morgan Rose, how you mentioned, where he's very expressive, and like you could almost watch him on mute and still be entertained by something he's doing.
Yeah, I would agree with that. But I mean, Morgan does it like Lars Ulrich is sort of at the top of the heavy metal mountain of drummers, but he's definitely not the best. Like Morgan Rose kills him in almost every single way of drumming, but and I think if you compare him to the rest of the members of Metallica, like it seems like Kirk Hammett gets a lot of flack too for some reason, but you look at Rob Trujillo and James Hetfield, and they are basically world class at what they do, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, look, all four of those guys are great in my opinion. Who cares who's like technically the best or whatever? It's just, I mean, look, they're Metallica. They're icons. They're awesome for a reason. It doesn't, to me, it never really mattered if someone was like the best technical player or what. Sometimes it's how you play, as opposed to what you play.
Exactly. The whole is greater than the sum of the parts.
Absolutely. So when you're around 8th grade, you said is when you started playing drums, with Kurt and with some of your other buddies, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, those were very short-lived projects because Kurt and I were really the only ones that stuck with it. Everybody else just kind of found other things to do, got into cars, got into girls, whatever. Kurt and I stuck by our instruments, started taking lessons, just started jamming covers, bass and drum. I mean, that's kind of how he and I learned to play together. And even to this day, when I've played with a ton of other bass players, including yourself, and for some reason, when Kurt and I get together, there's just that magic of having played together our entire musical lives. So that was basically the next step. He and I just stuck with it, played together for as long as we could, and then wound up, probably, I think we were juniors in high school. We hooked up with our friend Adam, who sang and played guitar, and we formed a 3-piece band called Detached, and that was our first original band that actually played shows and did a record and all that.
Very cool. So Detached was the one that kind of got it all started. How long did that band end up lasting?
I want to say right about 2 years. Because we started at junior year, and then when Kurt and I went off to college, that summer is when the band broke up. It was late that summer.
Gotcha. So there was Detached. Did you and Kurt play together in a few other bands after that, or did you guys each kind of like go and splinter off and do your own things?
After Detached, we tried doing another 3-piece, because we liked playing in a trio. So we hooked up with our friend Mike, and he played guitar, but he didn't sing. So Kurt, being a good singer, we decided we would have Kurt sing, Mike would play guitar, I'd play drums. That band, we played a house party at one point, and we only had 2 original songs, then we did a bunch of covers. So that wasn't really anything serious. After that, we sort of went our separate ways without planning on it. An opportunity for me came up to join a band called Social Zero, which was fairly big in Cleveland at the time, more of a progressive, heavier sound than what I did. But their drummer, his name is Joey Scale, and if you want to look him up online, that guy is ridiculous. He's a very jazzy kind of drummer, but he's so ridiculously good. I had some big shoes to fill. I was pretty nervous about that one, but I ended up getting that gig, and that's where Kurt and I sort of went our separate ways the first time. After that, we ended up Social Zero. A couple of those guys formed a side project called the Red Orchestra, and then I decided to form a side project getting even heavier, and that's where we brought Kurt back in a band called Burning the Affliction.
Nice. Now did Burning the Affliction, obviously that started off as a side project, did that become like a more serious thing, or what ended up happening there?
Burning the Affliction ended up being probably the most, I would say it's up there with the most successful bands I've ever been in terms of popularity. It didn't last very long. It was one of those things where the brighter the flame, the quicker it burns out. But we did our first show, and we sold out a club called the Foundry in Cleveland. Like, just, our very first show ever. Didn't know how it was going to turn out. We ended up selling the place out. And that was, it was a very, very, very proud moment for me. So it ended up taking sort of a front seat to Social Zero. But, it was just because the band ended up having more success, and I was having a lot of fun doing it and having fun playing with Kurt again.
That's awesome. First of all, to come right out of the gate and to sell out a club, you guys must have had some serious promo going on for that, or just had enough buzz and knew enough people where you just made it happen.
I think we did, because it was in the late 2000s when metalcore was real big, so we decided we were going to do metalcore with the screamy verses, singy choruses, and I mean, everybody that was in that band had done stuff before. We all knew people. We booked it. It was a free show, so that always helps out, and then we stacked the lineup deep with like some of the best bands that we could find that sounded like that, so it surprised me how many people actually turned out to it, but in a way, I mean, we did everything we could, so it wasn't surprising that the hard work paid off, I guess.
That's kind of funny. If it's a free show, do you still technically sell it out? I mean, I guess
they were turning people away who wanted to get in. So
there you go. That's a good sign.
It was to capacity.
So you still proved your point. People wanted to see you. So obviously that's the end game here.
Yeah, exactly.
Now I remember listening to your first episode. Do I have this right? One of them ended up getting some attention from Wind Up Records?
Yes. That was the rumor. I never actually talked to this supposed gentleman from Wind Up Records, but what happened was Social Zero didn't really end. We just sort of became a band called Dreamada. Our guitar player Joe left. We decided to change the name. We switched up the style a little bit, and Kurt ended up joining Dreamada down the line. But we we got a gig. We played a Battle of the Bands in Kent, Ohio, at a club called the Outpost, where we were sort of the house band there for a while. It seemed like we were playing every weekend there. But a really cool club. The staff is great. We did a Battle of the Bands there that a company here called FTF Records put on. And one of the judges was a guy named Jim Fetzer. And Jim got wasted, said some unkind things to Kurt, said some unkind things to a lot of people, and upset a lot of people that night. So he ended up leaving a bad taste in everybody's mouth. But I got an email from him saying, hey, I'm booking a show at this place called the Crock Rock in Allentown, PA. And if you look up, are you familiar with that club? You're sort of from Pennsylvania, aren't you?
You know, I am. I grew up about like 40 minutes outside of Allentown, but I moved to Florida when I was 15, so it's like, I think by the time I was old enough to start going to shows, I was already living down in Florida, so I had never been to the Crock Rock, but I mean, certainly I didn't grow up that far from Allentown, but when I heard that you guys had come all the way out there, I thought that was pretty cool.
Yeah, it was a far drive. We didn't get paid anything, but they basically gave us the hotel room for free.
Oh, there you go.
Fed us. You can't complain. It was, we were just out our gas money to get there and back, basically. But he booked this big festival, and it was on a Sunday, but it was over Memorial Day weekend, so there were a few people there. But we played mostly to an empty house, and it was a giant club. But it was still a good time, and it was still a lot of fun. We met a band called the Chuck Schaefer Picture Show, who became very good friends of ours. And supposedly out of that, Wind Up Records had some interest in Chuck Schaefer Picture Show and us, wanted to throw us on the road together, wanted to get us out there for a few showcases. And that was actually kind of the breaking point for me, where I realized that not everybody in our band was on the same page, because to me, this was the most exciting news in the world. We were going to make it. We were going to get a good record deal. We were going to tour the world, and that was going to be our career. And I was talking with the guys in Chuck Schaefer. They were booking an East Coast tour for, they were going out for 3 weeks, and they wanted us to jump on with them. And I was like, yes, absolutely. So I called the rest of the guys in my band, and they're kind of like, well, I got a good job now, and I can't really leave that. I got a car payment, I got my apartment. I'm like, really? I'm like, guys, this is what we've been playing for our entire lives, and now the moment's here, you're shying away. So that was sort of, the point when I realized that not everybody in Dreamada was on the same page.
Definitely. In defense of those guys, I can kind of sympathize with that, because, I don't know what the state of the business was back when that was happening. I certainly have an idea of what it's like now, anyway. Now certainly, to your point, obviously Wind Up is one of the bigger, or at least was one of the bigger indie labels in the country. Obviously, they've had a lot of really big name bands on there, Creed, Seether, Evanescence, all that sort of thing. They have a big pedigree, but it's like, it's so tough because, and I know that now, obviously having a house and, having a wife and stuff like that, it's like you do think about that sort of thing, and it's such a gamble. So I don't know if I can necessarily blame them for reacting that way, but that must have been really, really disheartening.
It was, and if this same opportunity were to present itself today, I would probably say no. Because I'm at that point in my life now where, same thing, I have a house, I have a good job. I was married at the time, and I love my wife to death. She's always been super supportive, and even now, every now and again she'll bring up like, hey, if you had a chance to join X band and go on tour, would you do it? Like, she's still completely on board if a good opportunity ever presents itself for me, and maybe I would, we don't have kids at this point, so the only people that are depending on me and my income are myself and her.
Right. It's just, and that's the thing that just breaks my heart about the business, is that it's such a crapshoot. As far as that goes, and it's just, it's like you don't want to be like the materialistic guy in the band, but at the same time, it's like that old saying goes, if it doesn't make dollars, it doesn't make sense. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I hear that, and it's one of those things where it's a 1 in a million chance, and I would love to take it, but at the same time, I've done so much stuff over the years. I've played so many good shows. I've got to experience a lot of amazing things that I can't be bitter about it. I can't be angry about it. If it all ended today, if I woke up tomorrow and I could never play drums again, I would be completely satisfied with everything I've done.
That's a good thing, man. That's a healthy attitude to have, and to still be pushing forward while kind of keeping it in perspective. Because sometimes it's easy to get down on yourself, but then it's like, yeah, you know what? I've done some cool stuff.
Exactly. You look back and you look at, like, I've done some regional touring. I've, played in front of record execs. There's not much more that you can do other than, hitting the big leagues and going on national tours.
That's pretty awesome, man. I've never played in front of record execs, so you got me on that one. So that's awesome.
I'll say this, I'm glad that I didn't know I was playing in front of record execs at the time, because I have a bad habit. I'll tell you this story. We got to, in Dreamada, one of our biggest collective influences is a progressive band from Australia called Carnival. And we got
you've told me quite a bit about Carnival.
Oh, they're amazing, man. They're amazing. And we got to open for them at a show they did at a club called Peabody's in Cleveland. And, we played one of the, Peabody's is a club that has 3 stages. Like, the national bands play the big stage, and all the local bands that get to quote unquote open would get to play these side rooms. So we're playing in one of the side rooms, and our guitar player, while I'm setting up, comes up to me and he goes, "Hey, I ran into Steve Judd, who's their drummer, who's one of the sickest drummers on the planet." He's like, "I ran into Steve and I told him, to come watch us. Like, he's standing over there." And I look out at the crowd and there's Steve Judd standing there, arms folded, watching me set up. And then I'm like, "Oh, great." And I had one of the worst drum shows I've ever had in my life, because the whole time I'm thinking, like, I'm nowhere near as good as this guy. I can't believe he's watching me. And I had like a mini freak out moment up there.
Oh man! Well, did you get any feedback from Steve?
No, he left like 2 or 3 songs in, and then I didn't hear from him after that.
That's too bad.
He's probably like, "I heard you miss every single hit on every single one of those drum fills, Eric."
Right. That would not be a good confidence booster.
No, not in the slightest. But again, one of my heroes watched me play drums, so that's kind of cool to say.
There you go. Not everybody can say that, man. But yeah, when I guess when the opportunity with the touring kind of came and went, did Dreamada kind of fall apart after that?
I wouldn't say Dreamada fell apart. We just took things much less seriously. We stepped back on playing every single show. We just started being more picky with everything. We started just writing more. Instead of writing songs that were catchier, we started writing longer songs that were more for us. It just changed the demeanor and the attitude of the band. And when everybody's not on the same page, it'll do that. That's one of the things that's nice about the band I'm in now, is that everybody's on the same page. We're all just, we respect each other. We love we're all fans of each other's work, and we get together when we can and play shows when we can for fun.
Right. Now, obviously, Dreamada was probably, I guess, would Dreamada have been sort of your most successful band up to that point?
As far as popularity, I would probably say no. As far as the stuff that we did, yes, absolutely. Because we got to do the label showcase. We had some interest from the labels. I think that the quality of the songs was very good, but in terms of popularity, I would still say it has to be between Social Zero or Burning the Afflictions in terms of the most popular bands.
Gotcha. So obviously Dreamada ends up becoming a less serious thing. It kind of becomes, just like not like it's less of a priority, but it's just, you're just not really sure where it's, where you're going with it. Does that eventually influence your decision to move down to Florida?
It was a big deciding factor, actually, to be honest with you. It was one of those things where I was like, well, I've pretty much gone through everybody that I know in Cleveland in terms of people to play music with. So why not try somewhere different? I had a house, I had an okay job, but, I'd been talking with the wife. We were on board to just drop everything, move halfway across the country and try something totally crazy and awesome. And that's when, I told the guys, I was like, "Hey, we're selling the house. I'm moving to Florida. Let's book one last show." And we did our last show at JB's in Kent. And then I think it was literally like 2 or 3 days later, I had the moving truck packed and was Tampa bound.
That's crazy, man. I mean, the fact that you and Brittany were so young, obviously, as you were, it was probably just be like, you know what? Let's pack up and move everything to Florida. And it wasn't just you two; it was also your buddies Corey and Paul, and it ended up coming down with you. Which that must have been just a wild time.
It was, and it was cool to have them there because I mean, I don't know that I would want to move somewhere now where I wouldn't know anybody. But we threw the option up to a bunch of our friends. We were just like, hey, we're moving to Florida. We're going here. We're going on this day. Who's coming with me? Kind of like that scene in Half Baked where he's like, I want to know, man. Who's coming with me? And Corey and Paul were like, yep, we'll go.
So. Nice. What made you guys decide on Tampa? Or specifically, you guys were in Dunedin, which is north of Clearwater.
Yeah, we looked at a few different places, actually. We talked about moving. We just wanted to move somewhere warmer because when you grew up in Ohio, particularly Cleveland, the weather sucks. The winters are long and terrible. We're like, we want to go somewhere where we don't have to deal with this. So we looked at like North Carolina, Myrtle Beach area. We looked at Savannah, Georgia, and then we looked at, 3 different places in Florida. We looked sort of the East Coast, near Daytona Beach, that area. We looked at Orlando, and we looked at Tampa. And we actually took a trip. We ended up deciding on Florida first. And then, I took a week off work. We flew into Orlando. We rented a car and we just drove around, checked out the different neighborhoods, checked out the sites. And we stayed with our friends Steve and Jen in Dunedin for a day. And just fell in love with that city completely. And I was like, I'm not much for city life. I grew up in the country. Where I live now, I can't see my neighbors. And I love that. But at the time, I was like, let's try something different. This is a city life, but it's a beach town. And we found a house that we could afford. We jumped on it, and that's how we wound up in Dunedin.
Dunedin does really have a very cool vibe. Almost like it's a college town, but not really. I mean... it's hard to describe it unless you've been there, but that was interesting that you ended up, out of all places, deciding on the Tampa Bay area as to, like, say, going out west to California somewhere, or like New York or something like that, which would be more of almost like you would think would be like the default move for a guy trying to make it in the band. Would be like, yeah, let's head to L.A. Was Florida just... was Florida just a more appealing destination than that?
There was that. We looked at California, but California is incredibly expensive to live, especially if you don't have anything when you're moving out there. Whereas Tampa, in Florida in particular, is very, its cost of living is similar to what I'm used to. So what really got me thinking of staying away from the LA or New York scene is something I saw actually on a Godsmack documentary of all things, where Sully was talking, it's a lot easier to make a lot of noise somewhere like Boston than it would be in New York or LA, where everybody is world class and there's a ton of great bands. If you go somewhere like Orlando or Tampa and, it's easier to be at the mid or upper tier of drummers in town than it would be if I were to go to LA, where I would be probably dead at the bottom as far as quality of drummers go.
Right. It's, it's crazy how even in today's world where everyone is so connected that there are still certain locations that have a different vibe than other places do. So, it's funny how that works. I guess maybe law of averages working out. I don't know, but I mean, so you and your wife and your 2 buddies ended up packing up and moving to Clearwater. Obviously, and based on wanting to do band stuff. I think that's incredibly gutsy thing to do. Now, when you moved down there, I guess you ended up working for Guitar Center, correct?
Yeah, I did. I actually worked for Guitar Center in between. I went right out of high school. I went to Kent State for a semester, and then I quit that, decided that the 4-year college thing wasn't what I wanted to do. And while I was trying to decide what to do, I ended up working for a Guitar Center in Cleveland. So when I moved to Florida, I needed a job pretty quick. Guitar Center was hiring, and having worked for the company before, if you've worked for them before, it's very easy to get back on board if you've left on good terms, which I did. Awesome. So it started off as, sort of just, it was a way to make some money, and it was a way to just meet a bunch of people that were in the scene to try to, introduce myself and try to get myself into some good projects.
Definitely. How quickly did you get into a band once you made the move?
It was within a few months, and it actually turned out from a Craigslist ad that I put up for, and I put up, I can't remember if they contacted me or if I contacted them, but it was the band Perfect Flaw.
Right.
Which they had been around, they'd gone through a number of drummers and bass players. And at the time they were just looking for a drummer. So, and I was looking for a gig. And they were, stylistically, they were pretty much what I wanted to do. It was sort of a heavy rock vibe in vein of like a Nickelback or something like that. Not real metal, but not real soft rock either. Kind of somewhere in the middle.
Yeah, they were a very much mainstream driven band, and I think because I don't remember if you and I actually talked, but I think you and I first met because my other band, Impatient Nation, was playing a show with Perfect Flaw. I think while you were in the band, probably either a show or two. So that's probably we had probably bumped into each other then, but obviously you didn't really meet until after.
Yeah, because I remember the first time I showed up at a Zebrageist practice, I'm like, I know this guy when you showed up.
Yeah. I had that same reaction. I'm like, he looks familiar.
Yeah, and I think what it was actually you came over while I was practicing with them. I think it was, I'd been with them for a little while. We were just trying to get the set put together, and I was trying to learn some of their songs, and you ended up coming over at one point. I think that was the first time I ever actually met you.
Yeah. Those guys had approached me about playing bass, and it happened a couple times. And I was seriously considering it for a while, but at the time I was already in like 2 bands full time and going to school and all this other stuff. I just would not have been able to make a lot of time for them. And and it was nothing against those guys, but I was really happy doing what I was doing, and it seemed like what they were looking for wasn't quite where I was hoping to go, at least in terms of how I wanted to contribute. And sometimes with some guys, you never know quite how you're going to fit into it, and just, so I mean, it was what it was. But I definitely, I remember playing a lot of shows with those guys over various different incarnations, and I know that you were certainly in one of them. But obviously you were with that band for a little while. That came to an end, and how now? Who in Zebrageist ended up contacting you?
It was Russ. I basically put up like a drummer for hire ad. Like, hey, here's some of the stuff I've done. Here's the gear I have. Here's the type of music I'm most comfortable playing. And it was Russ who ended up emailing me. And he's like, hey, check out my band Zebrageist. He's like, we have a drummer now, but we're, like you were talking earlier, how they were going to be, they were looking to get rid of him, replace him with somebody else, which I honestly didn't feel all that comfortable with, but the band and the songs were so good, and Russ and you were so cool, and Jose, that I was like, I'm not going to pass this up. I'll let them do what they're going to do. I'll show up and jam just to make sure everything fits right, and then when they're ready, I'll be there.
Right. And I mean, it's crazy how that whole thing went down with Brian, and obviously we still feel bad about it, but I mean, that was what it was. But I mean, out of that negative situation, like I said, we had a positive, and you came into the picture, and I think we all pretty much got along right off the bat. I know you and I certainly did, and that's always important for a rhythm section, to have the bass player and drummer to have that bond and connection. And you can't always manufacture that right away, but if you have that, then it makes a big difference, I think.
Yeah, and the one thing that I loved about Zebrageist more than any other band that I've ever been in is that there was only one guy in the band who was taller than I was. That being you. I'm 5'5", and I think everybody else in the band was 5'5" or lower. So it was nice to, take photos and to go on stage, and you just look ridiculously tall. The rest of us look normal.
I know. I felt like some awkward gangly giant up there with my bass. So, but that was what it was. But we had a lot of fun with that band, and I think right off the bat, we were in sort of like a mode where we were in between, we were still playing our old stuff, but we still had a lot of new stuff written. I don't remember how much of it was written before you showed up, or how much, because I mean I know that you definitely contributed on quite a few things, directly or not. I mean, certainly stuff was written while you were in the band, kind of with your own beats in mind, and I think I think we definitely had a relatively decent run there. We did play a couple shows, I think. Yeah, we did
we only did one with the 5-piece, which that was, in other than the fact that getting there late was kind of an issue. But playing, at Jose's place, just with the 5 of us in that garage, that was so much fun, man, and everything sounded really good. And then, one by one, people started leaving, and it ended up just being you, me, and Russ, and we did that Record Store Day show as a 3-piece.
Yeah. I remember, getting back to what you were saying about the 5-piece. We did, we had a friend of ours named Casey Todd. I think Russ wanted to try just singing for a little bit. So, and Casey had known a lot of the parts, so it's like he came in, practiced with us, and I think played like maybe 1 or 2 shows with us. I mean, that was such a bizarre time, and it's like we weren't sure like if he was an official part of the band or if he wasn't. I don't know. It was a little bit strange, but he was there for a little bit, and then after that, then we had Jose leaving, which was kind of a blow to all of us because he and Russ kind of started the band from the beginning. So that was a really difficult thing, but through it all, we managed to like play like a show or 2 as a trio, which was strange, but we managed to get through it.
Yeah, a lot of those songs, I mean, are 2 guitar oriented, but the way Russ plays guitar and the 2 of you singing together filled it out very well, I thought.
Definitely. And I mean, I think had we stayed together longer, we probably would have gotten somebody, another guy on guitar. I mean, it was a shame because I really didn't want Jose to leave, but I think he and Russ had, pretty bad falling out at the time. I don't even remember what it was about, but which by the way, recently since then, they've actually been talking to each other and made up. So, I mean, everything is good between the 2 of them, but just at the time, it got weird, and then Jose had decided that he had enough. So he left, and so that was that. And the weird thing was, I don't think the band ever fully recovered after that, because then Russ wasn't sure, and I almost feel weird, like, telling you about this, but then he would like come to me. He's like, "Man, I'm not sure if Eric's the right guy," and I'm like, "Wait a minute, what? We just lost Jose. We already went through this with a drummer before him. Now, so it was a bizarre kind of thing because you ended up moving back to Ohio anyway."
I did, and honestly, a lot of it, and I'll take the blame for some of that because my heart wasn't into it at the end. I pretty much had a serious, internal discussion with myself about whether or not, because all my life, all I had ever done was hang on to that dream that one day I'm going to make it in music. And it got to a point where I'd done it for so long, I'd plugged away for so long, and the industry had gotten to the point where it is now, where nobody's making any money, and it's not really a responsible, viable career unless you are willing to, unless you're willing to give up everything and risk, 10 years of your life trying to make it. And I wasn't willing to do that at that point. So my heart wasn't really into music at all. And it wasn't just a thing for Zebrageist. It was just in general, my heart wasn't into trying to be in a serious band any longer. And I think it showed with the fact that I wouldn't be texting you guys regularly to see what was going on. I think there was like a month and a half that I didn't talk to either one of you. And I think that was when I was like, oh, let me go see what Jack and Russ are up to. And I go on the Zebrageist Facebook page and my name is gone. So I'm like, okay, well, I should have seen that coming, I guess.
I mean, that was such a bizarre time. By that time, I was already living in Melbourne and coming back on the weekends, and it was insane. But I was thrilled that we managed to hang on to that as long as we did. But yeah, I mean that's interesting. I never really knew that you had felt that way about it, and I guess I'm relieved that it wasn't necessarily because of something that we did, but it was just kind of like your feeling on playing in general. You just had that sort of come to Jesus moment where you figure out, this is how I feel about this situation, so maybe I need to step back for a little bit.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly what it was. And like I said, it was nothing personal, and it wasn't fair to you guys for me to leave you in the dark about that, I'll admit. But I was just, it had been, like we were talking about, ever since I had been 13, 14 years old and playing, it was all I ever dreamed of doing. And having a realization that that's not your dream anymore, your dreams have changed, was pretty difficult. But I love Zebrageist. I love Russ's voice. I love the songs. I love the way you guys all work together. I'm a fan of the band first, so it was definitely nothing to do with that band in particular. Just like I was saying, my feelings on playing in general.
Well, thank you, man. I definitely appreciate you saying that. And certainly, I mean, had we got the chance to record like a proper record with you, I'm sure it would have been amazing. But it's just that kind of ended up happening, and I guess. Man, because I guess, in a funny way, it's like, I struggle with that a lot because I hear about how, I hear things about how the industry is, and I hear, about, what it's like for people to make it and how hard it is out there. And I mean, not that it was ever an easy thing to make it in, but it just seems like it's become harder and harder to like make any money, let alone, the big bucks. So I guess, not that we're just in it for the money, but it's like that's something I struggle with quite a bit, because I still have that passion inside of me. I still want to do it as much as I can, but I'm just trying to reconcile that with reality, and certainly the older I get, and so I'm sure you must have felt that way as well.
Yeah, it's one of those things where if someone could guarantee me that I could make, a modest living, if I could own a home somewhere and, be able to pay my bills, not be ridiculously rich or have the best of everything, but be able to support myself and my wife and eventually our children. If someone could make me that promise doing music, I would do it second. And I would do it as long, the longest days and the longest tours that I would need to do. But it's just too much of a risk these days, man.
I mean, I guess it's like that with any line of work. And certainly in the entertainment industry, if you're an actor, it's the same thing. If you're an athlete, you have an even shorter window of doing that. So it's just the odds are very, very tough. But certainly, I don't want to discount or discourage any younger musicians listening to this from doing so. It's just be aware of the realities of the situation and just prepare yourself for that. Prepare for the worst, but still hope for the best, obviously.
Yeah, exactly. And that's not my intent is to discourage anybody. I'm just telling you my own personal story. There are a lot of people I know that, they get out of high school and they just hit the road. They play, as many shows as they possibly can, and they make a fairly decent living at it. There's a guy in my band, I won't say which one, who I work as an insurance adjuster. Not like I don't make a ton of money, but I do fairly well for myself. He made more money than I did last year, and all he does is play gigs on the weekends. So it is possible too.
What kind of gigs?
He does cover gigs, solo acoustic gigs, and occasionally original music, but original music doesn't pay that well. So mainly it's getting into a cover band.
Hey, that's there's nothing wrong with that. I'm telling you. I mean, I like playing covers too, so that's pretty decent work if you can get it. I mean, it can be a tough job, but I mean, yeah, if he's happy doing it and making some bank, then good on him, man.
Yeah, he is living my dream. He makes a living playing music, which none of us, nobody else I know can say that.
Yeah, I mean, he's doing it, so that's pretty awesome. So all that, I mean, your thoughts on the industry, kind of like coming to that personal crossroads. I guess. Is that really what made you decide to end up moving back to Ohio?
There were a few things that made me decide to move back to Ohio. Like, very shortly after we moved to Florida, my mother-in-law had a pretty serious heart attack. And it was one of those things where it's like, I don't want to be that far away from my close friends and family if something is going to happen. The wife and I started talking about having kids, and we didn't want to raise our children away from the rest of our family. So we just decided, move back to Ohio. It wasn't something where I wanted to move exactly back to my hometown, tail tucked between the legs, so to speak. We decided that we would move somewhere within a decent driving distance. I had friends living in Columbus, so we stayed with them for a while. I ended up getting a job in Columbus, and that's where we settled down at this point.
Very cool, very cool. And you're probably still close enough to the Cleveland area where you could, it's obviously within driving distance. You can go and visit and all that sort of thing. No problem.
I was just there earlier today. I actually had band practice earlier. We practice pretty close to downtown Cleveland, so it's a little over a 2-hour drive from here, which sucks, but it's worth it.
Nice. And we'll get into your current band in a minute, but working at Guitar Center down in Florida and then Ohio before that, I imagine you probably got to meet quite a few people who come in through the store. Did you meet any any bands or musicians that you were a fan of? Or I mean, because I know, because I've heard you talk about some other players before, people that I'm a fan of. that I know of, and that you said you had met through the store. And why don't you maybe drop a few names as to people who you've met over the years working in Guitar Center?
Sure. In the Tampa Guitar Center, Cleveland Guitar Center, I didn't meet anybody. At least, I was young. I didn't know a lot of people then, so I could have and just not realized it. But Florida, older, wiser, the scene a little bit, and I had. The internet, you can tell who lives in the area, what bands are from the area. To my surprise, we met a lot of the New York Yankees there, and some of the Tampa Bay Rays, because the Yankees spring training field is a block away from the Tampa Guitar Center. So, Nick Swisher came in there one day.
Okay, and I know what you're talking about. Steinbrenner Field right off of Hillsborough.
Yep, yeah. So, we'd get Nick Swisher came in one day. I can't remember the guy's last name, but my wife worked at the Clearwater Guitar Center, and Hall of Famer is Bernie Williams. Is that a name that rings a bell?
I don't know. I'm not.
It was Bernie something. He's a New York Yankee, and he's a Hall of Famer, and he came in there one day. But as far as musicians go, probably the coolest experience that I had, two. One, Paul O'Neill from the Trans-Siberian Orchestra came in before their show.
Yeah.
He bought.
It's funny you mentioned Paul O'Neill. Not to interrupt you, but Paul O'Neill, I guess he was one of the guys from Sabotage, and they were probably sort of the biggest thing to ever come out of Clearwater. I think they were like the biggest band to ever come out of there, and they were late 80s, early 90s. Mm-hmm. They kind of had a big run for a little bit, and then later founded TSO. But I'm sorry about that. Paul O'Neill came into the store.
Yeah, Paul O'Neill came in to buy. He bought a few keyboards and a few guitars to give away on a radio show for some charity thing. And I was working in the warehouse at the time, and somebody called me and they're like, "Hey, there's this Paul O'Neill guy here." And at the time, it didn't ring a bell. I had no idea who he was. So I hopped on the internet, looked him up real quick. I'm like, "Oh, that's the founder of TSO." I'm like, I got to go up there and mingle. So I went up there, and he was just looking for somebody to help him to the car with everything. So me and another coworker there named Brett loaded the keyboards into the back of his car. He tipped us each $100, gave us tour jackets and tickets to the show.
Nice.
Yeah, it was amazing.
Paul O'Neill's a hell of a tipper. That's awesome.
Oh yeah. I mean, to walk a couple of keyboards 15 feet, it was the easiest money I ever made in my life.
Nice. That was a good work day.
Yeah, that was good. That was more than Guitar Center pays you for a week. Not just, not really, but seriously.
Inside scoop.
So, yeah. So, and then other than Paul O'Neill, there's a death metal drummer named Tim Young, and he's played with All That Remains for a little bit.
Oh, okay.
He was most recently with Morbid Angel, and he was recording with Morbid Angel, and there was nobody working in the drum department at the time, and being a drummer, I worked in the warehouse, but they're like, "Hey, can you go help out Tim Young?" And I'm like, "Oh, Tim Young, sure." But I walk in there, and sure enough, there he is, and he was also on the cover of Drum Magazine that month. So I was like looking at the magazine cover, looking at the guy, looking at the magazine.
You were like doing double takes throughout the whole thing.
The guy, I'm like, this is crazy. Yeah, so, you play it cool, you act like you don't know who he is. I'm just like, "Hey man," I'm like, "what can I help you out with?" He's like, "Oh, I just need to get these sticks." And then as I'm ringing him up, I look at him, I go, "Aren't you Tim Young?" And he goes, "Yeah." And I'm like, "Why are you buying drumsticks?" He goes, "Well, I'm recording the new Morbid Angel record, and I've broke my last pair, so the guys at Vic just told me to come here and buy a couple, and they'd pay me back for them." So I was like, "All right, fair enough. I'm selling Tim Young drumsticks. How cool is that?"
Like, why are you here? You're famous. Don't people just give you things?
I was like, don't you just get these mailed to you by the carton?
Right? Like, come on.
But I guess when you're tracking an album and you're playing death metal, you go through drumsticks pretty quick.
I would think so. And, it's funny you say it. For some reason, Tampa is like, or at least was like the death metal capital of North America at one point, or the world. I don't know why that was, but, Florida's...
I think it was Morrisound, actually.
Yeah, well, Florida's nice and sunny. Why are there so many angry guys down here? I don't get it.
Yeah. I think what it was, I watched a Cannibal Corpse documentary at one point, and I think what it was, they lived in New York, and the band Death, I believe, was from Florida, and they recorded an album at Morrisound, and the guys in Cannibal loved the way the record sounds, so they went to Tampa to record there, and they wound up just making that their home base.
Well,
don't quote me on that. I'm not really sure if that's 100% true, but I think that's mostly the origin of how Tampa became the death metal capital of the world.
All right. Well, if any listeners are wondering, just Google it and try not to blow up my Twitter too bad if we got this wrong. All right, give us a break.
Yeah, all the metalheads will be like, "You were wrong about this. This is stupid." Jack and Eric know nothing. You're not true metal.
Well, I mean, I don't know, Eric. If there's one thing I could say about social media is that most people are just so calm and rational in expressing their opinions.
Yeah, exactly. And they'll be, the most common phrase I see on comment boards is, "I respect your opinion, but here's mine."
Yeah. Yeah. I'm not even going to get into that. That's a whole podcast in and of itself.
Right, exactly.
So you end up making the move back to Ohio, obviously for family reasons, and I think one of the first things I had heard about you doing back when you moved up there was reuniting with Dreamada for a show.
Yes, we did. We moved back. We all kind of had the itch to get together and play, so we got together at our singer's house. Ran through the stuff, and it actually still sounded pretty good. I mean, we hadn't played together in 3 years at that point, but it still sounded decent enough to where I was like, okay, maybe a couple more practices and this will be show ready. So that was it. We booked a show at the Outpost, that club I was talking about before, that kind of started the whole record label interest, and we booked a show there. It wasn't a sellout, but it was one of the bigger crowds we played for there. Everybody, it was just fun to get all our friends back together, get the band back together, and just play for everybody one more time.
That is pretty cool. I mean, and it's a good thing that you ended up leaving on good terms, and that they were open to that idea of bringing you back and getting together for that one show, that everyone was getting along. That's, sometimes that can be a little rare with some bands, but it's refreshing to hear that was how it happened.
Yeah, we never, we all had differing opinions, and I'm not to say that we never had a band fight. There were quite a few, but we're all, we all respect each other. We're all good friends, and it's not something that, we can't work out the little details for. But if those guys called me up and they were like, hey, we want to do another reunion show, I'd be there in a second. Without question.
Was there ever any talk of continuing it beyond just a one and done thing? What was, making like another serious go at it and doing it full time?
No, not really. Our singer Ian has a kid now, married with a house. Our guitar player Cody is basically a full-time artist. Like, he paints, and I think that's how he makes his living, is, selling his paintings and teaching art, which is absolutely amazing for him. And then, Kurt and I, settled into some careers pretty deep now, and it's one of those things where it is fun to do, and it's fun to get back together, but I don't know if I would ever want to be in a full-time band that practices twice a week and plays shows every single weekend. It's just not, it makes the times that you do get together more special. It makes the shows that you play more special when you're not doing it constantly, and that's what I like about where I'm at now.
Definitely, I can see that. And speaking of where you're at now, tell us about Salvation Syndicate. That's the band you're playing with right now.
So Salvation Syndicate is sort of formed out of, when I moved back to Ohio, my friend that I was telling you about that lived in Columbus, his name is Mark Brown. Played with him in Burning the Affliction. He was mainly known in the Cleveland area for playing in a band called American Rockstar, which was one of the more popular bands in town for a very, very long time, and they're very, very good. And that band was sort of at its end. After 10 years together, they were all just not feeling it anymore, wanted to try something different. So Mark and I had been talking about doing things, and then once American Rockstar ended, we got together with their singer, whose name is Dallas Riffle. The guy who was playing bass for them is a gentleman named Chris Donnelly, who plays guitar and sings in Salvation Syndicate. And then another Mark Gordon, who played in a band called Sindust, and he also plays in a band called Via the Sun. So basically, we just picked and chose from our friends and people we knew, the best players that we knew who did each thing. We got 4 singers in the band, which is absolutely awesome. Like, to listen to those guys sing, it sounds like the Eagles sometimes. It blows my mind. So that's sort of where Salvation Syndicate came to be, was just us trying to put together, I don't want to use the term supergroup, but guys from other bands who were at the top of their game.
That's pretty incredible that you have 4 good voices in the band. It's very rare to find a lot of guys who can sing. I've always been of the mind where it's like the more voices you can have in a band, the better.
Yeah, and I would agree with that 100%. It's hard enough to find one guy in a band who can sing on key and who can sing good, and I have 4. I'm the luckiest guy on the planet.
That is awesome, and I've definitely noticed that whenever I've listened to some of the Salvation Syndicate demos that you've posted on there. Which, by the way, look them up on SoundCloud because they're awesome. Yeah, I mean, so Salvation Syndicate. So you were there essentially. I mean, you're kind of part of the original lineup. You'd kind of helped build that band from the ground up.
Yeah, and that's what's cool about it is like I do. There are days, I'll be honest with you, where I question why I am playing in the caliber of such high quality musicians. I'm like, I don't write, I don't sing. They could very easily find a drummer who sings and have 5-part harmonies, but they don't. Like, I was there from the beginning. I was part of the the original group that decided to get this thing together and get this thing going. So it does feel like my band, and that's what's cool about it. I haven't had that in quite a while.
Well, I think you're being a little hard on yourself because you are a phenomenal drummer, my friend. And honestly, no, you are. And honestly, I don't know if you thought about doing a little like backup singing because I mean I've heard you sing before, and I think you could do it.
When have you heard me sing? Nobody's heard me sing.
I've heard you sing a little bit, just kind of half jokingly, half. Kind of goofing, kind of jokingly singing like on some of it on your podcast every now and then when we were hanging out back in Zebrageist. I would hear a few things a little bit, so I'm like,
all right,
and I was like, you know what? If he really like kind of put the effort into it, put the mind, he could probably do it. I think he could.
All right, well, I will. You've inspired me. I'm going to give that a shot. If I can somehow, get my drumming brain and my singing brain to work separately, maybe I'll throw a few backing screams or something in on a couple songs. So if that does happen, you'll have Jack to thank.
Well, thank you, man. I appreciate being an inspiration. But, I mean, and I've always said this to guys who I've played with and to guys in my own band. It's like, look, it doesn't matter if you have the best voice or not. I think so many guys get caught up into that thing where like, well, I'm not really a good singer, so I'm not going to sing backup. That's the trick. You don't really have to be like the best singer or to even want to be a lead vocalist. You can still throw in backups in there, even if you're a little bit off key, whatever, it doesn't matter. The fact that you at least have some vocals in the background, it makes a difference.
I gotcha. The only thing that I will say to that is I don't think I'll ever throw in a 5th harmony on top of a 4-part harmony. I don't have a good ear for that sort of thing, and I could very easily see the 4 of them singing like angels, and then I come in with like a and it all goes to hell.
Was that Bertagnolli? All right, cut his mic.
Yeah, like turn Eric down in the mix.
But I mean, obviously you're focused on the drums, so I gotta imagine it is really hard to sing while playing the drums.
And I actually tried doing backing screams in Perfect Flaw, because their old drummer did, and I can do a little bit of like a yelly, screamy kind of thing. And I tried doing it in Perfect Flaw, and it was just one of those things where I'm like, oh yeah, I can do a yell and play at the same time. But even if you're just yelling one note, one word, and trying to hold that out, it throws your drumming off if you're not used to doing it. So it's something that I maybe with a little bit of practice I could pull off, but it's not something I could just jump in and do, which is what's so amazing about the rest of the guys in my band is when they'll be playing, like Mark will be playing a ripping solo and then he'll throw a harmony over top of it with his voice, and just like how can you separate your hands from your voice like that? It amazes me.
I mean, with some songs I can relate to that because being a bass player who sings a little bit, it can be tough because you have to keep that rhythm going constantly. It's playing bass is a lot like the drums in that way, where it's like it needs to be in that pocket. You need to have that. So it's like on some songs I could get away with it, but on other songs it's tougher. I mean, I'm not Geddy Lee, so it's very tough to do that. I don't know how he does it.
No, me neither. Geddy Lee is absolutely ridiculous because the bass lines he plays are incredible on their own. His vocal lines are complex and really high and awesome. And then you add in keyboards with his feet just for good measure. That guy is inhuman.
Well, he is a freak of nature. That's been well documented. Yeah, so Salvation Syndicate is now. Have you guys been together a couple months now, or when did the band, I guess, would you say officially started?
The band officially started I would say within 3 to 4 months of me moving back. So early I moved back in 2012, so it was probably early 2013 that the band officially started. We did our first show this year in April. We did one other show since then, and our next gig is August 1st. So we've done a few shows. The record is... I wish I could give you an update on the record, because I did the drums for it January of 2014, and here we are in 2015, and I still don't know how much of the record's been done because Dallas is doing the rest of it. But every now and again he'll send me a complete song and I get all giddy. I'm like, oh, this is awesome, this sounds great, how much more you got? And he'll be like, don't worry about it, you'll get it when you get it.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. I mean, because when you're starting a band from the ground up, and when you're one of the original members, it's so tough to start something from scratch. And that's, I mean, what I've been going through when Vertebreaker started, or what at least the band that became Vertebreaker. You know, it's very difficult because you're trying to start something from nothing, and you're not even sure what to do yet. It's like, do we record first? Do we just go right into playing shows? You know, because especially when you don't have any songs together and it's all new guys that you have to work on creating all the songs and naming the band, which is crazy enough in and of itself, and just, you know, figuring out who you are. But you do also have that advantage of, like, once it's done, once it's finished, then you do have that satisfaction. It's like, yeah, look what I created.
Yeah, our original plan when we started the band, we got together and we wrote basically 2 albums worth of material.
Wow! So
we picked that was probably our first 8 months to a year, was just getting all the demos and everything hashed out. So we did that, and then our plan was, we're going to do a record, and we're basically going to release the record, have a live show, and launch the band all on the same day, which would have been epic and absolutely amazing, but the record started taking longer and longer to do because we started wanting to add more and more to it, that we're just like, you know what, let's abandon that plan. There was a good show opportunity that came up for us for our debut, and we decided to jump on it. And we're like, okay, we'll launch the band, we'll throw a couple demos up there, and we'll sort of do it the way we had been in the past, which is, you throw a few songs up, give people an idea what you sound like, play a couple shows, get the buzz going, and then put the record out when you've already got some footing in the scene.
That's incredible. I mean, 8 to 10 months. Did anybody else, like, outside of the band, like, really know about it? You probably did. I mean, because I'm guessing you probably didn't promote it that much, but I mean, did you try and, like, keep it a secret until the band was ready to play shows, or? Not
really. I mean, we didn't want to tell people the name. We didn't want to play music for everybody, but, I would, even at work, I'd talk about the band. I'd talk about this. People were like, what's your band sound like? I'd be like, oh, here's a demo. And I'd play it for people at work just to kind of get an idea of, what type of a reaction it would be, because to me it was absolutely amazing, just because I've been such a fan of these guys for so long that they could put out almost anything and I would think it was great. So it's hard for me to be objective in that regard, but I played it for some of my family, some of the people at work, some of my close friends as things moved along. And then, but it wasn't like a thing where I was on Facebook every day like, hey, getting together for band practice today, get ready for this band that you don't know about yet.
Right. You didn't want to upsell it too much without it being ready yet. I definitely can understand that. So, but it sounds like you guys are in full swing right now. You guys are, playing. I guess the record is in production. It's not released yet, but you guys are out there gigging and kind of building a little fan base, hopefully, up there, and hopefully everything's going great with it.
It is. We did our first show back in April. We played a club called Rock Bar. It was also a sellout. We didn't headline it. We were one of the opening bands, but it was a reunion show for a band called Burning Vegas, which was pretty big in the scene when, before I had moved. They were one of the bigger bands around, and they broke up. They got back together, invited us on their reunion show, which was really cool to play. It was, if you head to my Facebook page, you can see I've got some photos from that show that the crowd was just massive for being inside that club. So that was a really, really good way to start off. We did a show at a club called The Foundry a few weeks ago that it was the same one that Burning the Affliction sold out for our first time, and it wasn't, there was an issue with the monitors at that show. It wasn't nearly as good as the first one, in my opinion, just from our standpoint, because of the quality of the sound and everything like that. We couldn't tell how we sounded. I was told we sounded good, but you don't know because you couldn't hear anybody. But then our next show, I'm actually incredibly excited for our next show, which is August 1st at the Musica in Akron. It's another reunion show of sorts from a band that was bigger before I moved called Amplexus. And from what I hear, that show's actually very close to selling out already. And, we're still over a month away from it.
That's cool, man. You guys are making some moves. I like it. And by the way, I didn't mean to sound condescending when I said little fan base. That sounded like kind of a thing to say. No. I apologize for that.
No, you're fine, man. You're totally fine. It's when you're in an unsigned band, it's all relative. I think that, for me, the 20 people to 30 people of my friends and family that come to a show is, mainly what I care about. I want them to come and I want them to have a good time. If the place is packed, great. If it's just those few people, I'm fine with that too.
That's cool. So, obviously, Salvation Syndicate is doing really good. Now you have the Music Speaks podcast that we mentioned earlier. So you've been getting into the podcasting world like myself. You've definitely inspired me to get into it. It's pretty incredible medium, isn't it?
Dude, it's so much fun. Like, I did not know what to expect getting into it. I've always liked talk radio. I've always liked listening to podcasts, and I've wanted to do something like this, but, the only thing I knew I knew that you could do was get on a FM radio show in town and become a shock jock. And then I started hearing about podcasting, and I was like, you mean I could get on the internet and just upload these radio shows of me talking about anything, and there will be an audience for it? And it's my same mentality with playing shows. Even if it's just, 20 to 30 people that I call my friends that listen into it, I'm fine with that. I just like having these conversations, getting it to reconnect with people like yourself. Because I would have liked to have talked to you for an hour and a half anyway. And if I record it, then that's cool. I can put that up and other people can enjoy it too. But it's a blast, and I'm sure, you're having a good time doing it too.
It is. It's something I've wanted to do for a long time. And, to your point, like, getting on the radio and being a shock jock here, you don't have to do that. You can just be yourself. You don't have to be like edgy or shocking or like try to be like some kind of badass or anything like that. You can just be who you are and have conversations with your friends, and and not even being like a formal interview. It's very conversational. It's very natural. I hate to use the word organic because everybody uses that word to death, but it is. But yeah, it is a very natural state to be in, and it's a great way to express yourself. I've always said it's like the new blog. It's like the new personal journal. It and almost in today's music environment, entertainment environment, period, you have to generate as much content of your own as you can. You can't really rely on anyone else to do that. And I think this is an amazing way for people to get to know who you are on a personal level. And I think that's really where that connection happens between us and fans, is having that personal connection, feeling like they know you.
One of my biggest inspirations in getting into podcasting, there was Kevin Smith, because he did the Fat Man on Batman podcast. It's like he likes Batman, so he talks about Batman. But what got me... Yeah, but what got me into thinking about doing one that's music related was Jamie Josta from Hatebreed's podcast. And I was not a very big Hatebreed fan for a long time. Until I started listening to his podcast, because he's such a cool, down-to-earth guy, and when he talks about what his songs mean to him and why he writes the way he writes, I made a Hatebreed Pandora channel. Now they're one of my favorite bands.
That's
I have
awesome.
a appreciation for them once you know getting to know the people behind it, I think is something that's awesome about growing up now. Even though the music industry isn't as big as it used to be and it's a lot harder to make it, you can make personal connections with your favorite musicians in ways you never could before.
Yeah, I also think it's a matter of, creative people tend to relate to each other in a lot of ways. Even if you make different kind of music than that person does, even if it's like an actor or singer or dancer or whatever it may be, or an artist, whatever it is, I think there's something about that draws people together like that. And if you're passionate about something, even if people aren't necessarily passionate about the thing you're passionate about, they like hearing people speak of things that way. If that makes any sense.
No, it definitely does. I was, even listening to, going back to the Josta podcast, he has everything from like MMA fighters to musicians, and I enjoy them all because, you know, he can get a guy in there, and I've always thought of, you know, the MMA scene as kind of douchey, as they say. Like, you know, you just picture the bros in their tap out shirts and everything, but when you listen to them talk and you're like, man, these people are just as passionate about their fighting as I am about playing drums. So it gives you a way to sort of relate to them.
Oh yeah, I mean, I'm sure that's like anything else. You're going to have some people who are a little bit douchey, but you also have some other people who aren't, who are just hardworking people, and I think that's really what separates it, no matter what you end up doing. You know, it's funny because, you know, I think there used to be that mentality for back in the day, like, you know, where it's like you didn't want to do too many interviews because you didn't want to put yourself out there too much. Like, I remember hearing something that, like, Led Zeppelin, they hated to do interviews back in the day. Like, they would almost make it a point not to, because that would, like, I guess they felt that would ruin the mystique of the band or whatever. But it almost seems like nowadays you really can't afford to do that.
Right. There's only one band I can think of that does that, and that's Ghost. They've gone even as far as keeping the identity of everybody in the band a complete secret. But unless you're going to go that far with it, you've got to, you know, you got to put yourself out there, because it's one of those things where some of my favorite bands became my favorite bands because I liked the people in them as opposed to liking the music first.
Right. And sometimes when you get to know someone on that personal level, it almost makes you know, hear things a different way because you look at it from a different point of view and you don't go into it like prejudging, I guess. If that makes any sense.
Yeah, no, I agree with you, man.
So hopefully it's like that with our two podcasts and our two bands. So let's just keep our fingers crossed on that one.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, my podcast kind of took like we were going full steam at the beginning. We put out like, you know, we're putting out like an episode every other week or, you know, a couple times a month, and then it kind of derailed lately. I had some things happen in my personal life that, you know, everything sort of took a backseat. And
you know, life gets in the way. You know,
yeah,
it happens.
It does. But we just put up a new one where Kurt and I talked about, we went to Rock on the Range Festival. So we did one episode beforehand and we did one episode afterwards where we sort of wrapped up and reviewed the whole festival. So, and you know, I want to get back to having more guests on. I mean, we want to do a podcast with you again, after, you know, we get a few more under our belts with some of the other people we got lined up. But it's, you know, having guests on is a great thing because, I mean, as much as Kurt and I can sit here and talk about pretty much anything for hours, bringing in that third opinion is awesome to have. And that's, if you listen to the podcast we did with you, you can really hear that.
Well, absolutely. I had a blast doing it with you guys. And the good thing about either you coming back on here or me being on yours is that we've already kind of did the heavy lifting. We've already kind of introduced ourselves and talked about where we are and where we came from and how we got to we are now. Now we can just have normal conversations, and it's great.
Yeah, exactly. We could do a whole podcast defending Scott Stapp.
Yeah, which I think that was part of yours. And yeah, I mean, definitely there's been some developments in that whole area which we could get into. I'm not going to get into it right now, but yeah, I'm sure that could be an episode.
Another time.
That could be an episode unto itself. But yeah, I mean, and now that you got me caught up with everything, and now that you're back in Ohio, you know, being in a different state, in a different part of the country, and experiencing the music scene in there as opposed to your hometown, I'm definitely curious about the role that geography tends to play in that, because, you know, I've never lived in Ohio. I've never really been to Cleveland. I've, you know, driven through it before, but I've never really like spent a lot of time in there, and I'm always fascinated because you always hear about the East Coast and the West Coast, and the Midwest, to me, as an outsider, seems to have a really strong connection to rock music. And I think maybe it's because of the blue-collar nature of just of that part of the country. It's, you know, they call it the heartland and all that. And, you know, me not being from that area, I'm sort of fascinated about what it's like there as opposed to what it's like in Florida or New York or Philly or LA or something like that. What do you think is the biggest difference in your experience from living in Tampa Bay versus the Cleveland scene or the Columbus scene? Or, I mean, if you could compare Florida and Ohio, are there differences? Are they just kind of all the same? I mean, what would you say were like the biggest like compare contrast points on there?
I would definitely agree with you. The Midwest is a more blue collar type thing, and it's more rock friendly. One thing that I will say that struck me as vastly different in living in Florida as living up here, the Cleveland bands tend to play shows in Cleveland and the Cleveland area, maybe venture to Akron, occasionally to Columbus. But if you go like out of your town, it's a big deal. It's a big thing. Whereas in Florida, I look at bands like Traverser and Red Calling and Vertebreaker, where you guys are playing, the stretch along I-4 pretty much regularly. Like you'll do a show in Tampa, then you'll do a show in Orlando, do one in Cocoa Beach, and it seems like it's easier, and there's more of a camaraderie between the bands of the different cities doing show trading and things like that than there is up here. But the one thing I will say is that it seems to me to be a lot easier, and there's a lot more big local bands up here. You have, the goal that I have with my band right now is mainly just get as big as we can in Cleveland so we can play bigger shows here, maybe once or twice a month, and that'll be about it. Whereas in Florida, it seems more that the bands stay smaller, but their fan base is spread across a wider geographic area, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, that does make sense. And to be honest, we kind of started off spreading out. Like we would like play in Tampa and St. Pete. And to be honest, we haven't really played there in almost a year just because, it got too expensive just getting all our stuff and renting a U-Haul trailer and going across there and to play to hardly anybody. And it's just economically, it hasn't really made too much sense lately. So we've been kind of concentrating things more in Melbourne and a little bit in Orlando here and there, and that approach has actually been kind of working for us, weirdly enough. So, it's funny that you mentioned that because that almost seems to be the case around here, where it's like we'll have, like, we've been together about like 2 years now, and just now we're starting to get make a little bit of noise in Melbourne, and now like we're starting to play in Orlando a little bit more, but like you'll hear. But it's like crazy. People will have heard of us, and I'm like, really? How do you know about us? And it'll be people I don't know. So that's always a really gratifying feeling. But I'm sure that you feel a little bit of that with Salvation Syndicate, and it seems like there's a much more like organic. There's that word again, home base, and so it seems like maybe the differences aren't really as different, in that respect.
Yeah, no, I would agree with you. They're much more similar than they are different. The differences, like you said, are minor. It seems, like I said, it just seems easier up here to build a fan base in a small concentrated area than, at least from my experience down there. It seemed like you had to play regionally and you had to sort of build your base across a wider geographic area than you do here.
And there's definitely something to be said for that, but yeah, I honestly, like, I think you guys are doing it the right way in terms of building your fan base locally before like really venturing out, because there are a lot of bands who go on the road and, with no management deal, no guarantees, anything, and just go and just try their luck on the road, and it doesn't really make a lot of sense right now because you don't really have a lot of draw, and it's like if you're not really drawing big crowds in your hometown, maybe you shouldn't be touring.
Yeah, I would agree with you there. And I mean, one of the, like I said, I do still love the experience of playing a bigger show. And to me, if I can't have it by, going on the road, touring nationally, having the record deal, having the songs on the radio, having the video on the front page of YouTube, then why not do everything I can to build that in one city locally so I can have that experience?
I'm not against, playing out in different cities and, taking that chance. And even if it's not to a great crowd, you still get that experience of traveling a little bit, playing in front of a different crowd. But, I mean, it's like, we had done that a lot in the beginning, but now it just sort of makes sense to kind of stay a little bit more in your area and build an audience, then venture out. So it's it's definitely a fine line to walk, but it's interesting how those strategies kind of come together and how they can differ from from town to town.
Right, and if you live somewhere like, say, I don't know, in the middle of Montana, you're not going to have as many places to build locally as if you're a band that's in that sort of an area, it might make more sense for you to start the touring earlier.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's all about what situation you're in, but just trying to make the best of whatever your situation happens to be. But yeah, man. I mean, it sounds like Salvation Syndicate is doing that, and it sounds like even though you have that realization of the realities of the business, you still have that desire, and you still have that desire to give it as much of it as you possibly can, and just to get everything you can out of it. I mean, would I be correct in assuming that?
Yeah, absolutely. The only thing I would say that's changed is my expectations of what I'm getting back out of it. Like, I fully prepared myself to go into these local original shows, make no money, and potentially play for very few people. And as long as you don't set your hopes and your expectations too high, there's not a lot to be disappointed with. The only thing that I expect is that I'm going to show up, I'm going to play some good music with good friends, and have a good time. And as long as that's what I'm expecting out of it, you can't really be disappointed.
You can't ask for much more than that. And honestly, it's like, even though you have the realistic expectations, I mean, I know that like me, you still have that fire inside of you. You still want to do it because it's just...
Yeah, I definitely do.
Stuff like that, it doesn't...
I still want to take it as far as...
I mean, I don't care what anyone says. It doesn't just go away. You know what I mean? Once you have that love for it.
Right. I made a comment on Facebook the other day that, I'll always be playing music, even when I'm, 75 years old in the nursing home. I'll still be jamming to Pantera and playing Pantera covers with anybody else who wants to.
Oh, dude, can you imagine what that's going to be like when we're in our 70s? There are going to be old people listening to Pantera. Think about that.
Oh, that's a scary world.
Where's my Metallica CD?
5 minutes alone.
Exactly. There are going to be old people listening to rap, too. Think about that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think when old people are listening to black and death metal, that's when I'll be like, okay, this is a world I'm okay with.
They'll be having sleeve tattoos and all kinds of things. It's going to be a bizarre future that we're leaving for our future generations.
I cannot wait.
Oh, Lord. All right, man. Well, dude, this has been an amazing conversation. You and I could go on for 5 hours. Thankfully, we're not going to do that. We're going to leave it here. But before we go, is there any last-minute things you want to plug? Where can we find Salvation Syndicate online?
You can go to salvationsyndicate.com. That has links to all our social media, to our SoundCloud page, our Reverb Nation. So salvationsyndicate.com is going to be your home for everything that we got going on right now. And then, Facebook, you can find us facebook.com/Salvation Syndicate. Like I said, we have a show August 1st. We're playing in Akron at the, Musica. And that's going to be an awesome show. So if you happen to be listening and you're in the area and you want to check out some of the finest local bands that we have to offer, be at that show because it's going to be a good time.
Good deal, man. Sounds like it's going to be a great thing, and you guys are doing it. I'm so proud of you that you haven't given up and that you're still getting after it. And it sounds like you're very much in the same place that I am. It's like we still got that fire burning inside of you. You still have that drive.
Exactly. I'll leave it with a comic book metaphor because I know you like comic books. It's like when in Batman Begins, when Bruce Wayne says to Alfred, like, "Haven't given up on me yet," and then he just goes, "Never."
Yes,
that's you and me. We are the Alfred, and music is our Batman.
Pretty much. Wow, I'm gonna steal that quote because that's amazing.
Go for it.
All right, man. Well, dude, this has been awesome, talking to you again. I'm sure we will do it again quite a bit more. I mean, we've only scratched the surface.
Yeah, absolutely, brother. Like I said, we'll be in touch. We'll try to get you set up on Music Speaks podcast again, and I'd be more than happy to come back on anytime you'll have me.
Yes, and by all means, any listeners of this podcast, check out the Music Speaks podcast. They're awesome. And, yeah, we'll pretty much just leave it at that, man. I'll definitely be getting in touch with you again soon, all right?
Sounds good, Jack.
Well, there you go, guys. That was Eric Bertagnolli, longtime friend of mine, excellent drummer, producer, podcaster. Certainly, he and I go way back, and it just makes really one interesting story when you think about it. Here was a guy who had a sort of a crossroads in his life when it came to music and when it came to doing the thing he loved, and to see him still doing it after all this time and to have found that love, that passion again, it's really inspiring, because I think everybody, it's normal to get discouraged at one point or another, but he obviously still has the love for it, and he still has the passion, and he's just in a really a much better place than he was when he and I and Zebrageist ended up splitting. And so I'm glad to see him in a good place, and it sounds like Salvation Syndicate has a really bright future ahead of it. So best of luck to those guys, and hopefully you learned a little bit more about different parts of the country and what the differences are. So this is I'm really happy with how this podcast turned out. I would have had it out sooner. I recorded that interview about a week ago, or at least a week before I ended up posting this. It just took a while to edit everything. You probably heard a lot of different background noise, and there were a few connection issues between myself and Eric. So it took me a while to edit everything together, make sure everything sounded good, and hopefully it sounds good now. So that's all I have to say about that. And definitely want to thank Eric for coming on again. I'm sure this won't be the last that we've heard from him. As far as some upcoming events, the band and I will be playing next week, Saturday, July 11th, at the Boondocks in Melbourne, which is one of our favorite clubs in the area. We've played there probably more than any other place, any other venue. The event is called Stripped Down. It is being presented by Blind Anxiety Entertainment, and we will be there along with I Woke Up Early for My Funeral, good friends of ours, along with Travis Daigle and Dominic St. Charles and Positive Chaos. So all of these bands and singer-songwriters will be performing acoustically. The last acoustic show that we all did together was back in January, but that turned out really, really well. So we're always excited to do stuff like that, which is a little bit outside of the box as far as what we normally do, but we really love playing acoustically, and it's going to be a really special night, so definitely come out and see that if you can. Also in August, Friday, August 21st to be exact, we are playing at the Shady Oaks Lounge in Palm Bay. This is our first time being there. We will be playing there along with our good friends Who Was I, and Slick Wicked will be there as well. So definitely come out and see that. Friday, August 21st at Shady Oaks Lounge in Palm Bay, Florida. So that's it for episode 2. Make sure you go back and listen to all the other episodes, and follow me on Twitter at JackXConnor. Like me on Facebook at facebook.com/JackConnorMusic. Also, feel free to check out the band at vertebreaker.net. And if you have any questions, comments, or suggestions, make sure you email me at jackconnorpodcast@gmail.com and tweet me with the hashtag Phoenix Report. Thank you guys for tuning in again this week, and I will see you next time. Take it easy.